When you hear the word Sith, chances are your mind immediately jumps to Emperor Palpatine cackling while shooting lightning out of his fingers. I get it. Palpatine is the poster child for everything wrong with the dark side. He was manipulative, power-hungry, and absolutely evil. His plan to rule the galaxy wasn't just ambitious, it was tyrannical. Let me be clear right from the start. I'm not here to defend him. Palpatine was a bad dude, no question about it. But here's the thing. Palpatine does not represent all Sith. Just like one corrupt politician doesn't define an entire government or society. One power-mad Sith Lord doesn't capture the essence of Sith philosophy. The Sith as a whole are far more complex, and in many ways, they've been unfairly villainized by the Jedi and the galaxy at large. What if I told you that the Sith weren't evil, but rather misunderstood? What if the Jedi, yes the Jedi, are partly to blame for how we view the Sith today? When you peel back the layers of Sith history, you start to see a very different picture. The Sith aren't all scheming maniacs hell-bent on galactic domination. They're thinkers, philosophers, and, yes, rebels. They stand for ambition, freedom, and the belief that emotions are a source of strength rather than weakness. These aren't inherently evil ideas. In fact, they're ideas many of us hold in our own lives. So why do we immediately associate the Sith with evil? The answer lies in who controls the narrative. Remember, history is written by the victors. The Jedi had centuries to frame themselves as the guardians of peace, and the Sith as the ultimate threat to the galaxy. But the truth is far more nuanced. While the Jedi preach control and self-denial, the Sith embrace passion and self-determination. And let's not forget that the Jedi's own rigid beliefs and failures gave rise to some of the galaxy's greatest conflicts. The Sith didn't just appear out of nowhere. They rose as a response to the flaws in the Jedi Order and the corrupt systems they supported. So yes, Palpatine was evil, and his actions are indefensible. But don't let one Sith Lord define an entire ideology. The Sith are more than just their darkest representatives. They're a philosophy, a movement, and in many cases, a reaction to the galaxy's injustices. Today, we're going to take a closer look at the Sith, who they were, what they stood for, and why they deserve more credit than they've been given. It's time to rethink what we know about the dark side. Let's begin with a radical thought. What if the Sith aren't evil? What if they've been victims of a centuries-long smear campaign orchestrated by the Jedi? Think about it. The Jedi are the ones writing the history books. They're the ones holding galactic press conferences about peace and balance, while the Sith get painted as the galaxy's ultimate boogeyman. How fair is that? When we look at history, it's always written by the victors. The Jedi controlled the Republic, served as its protectors, and monopolized the narrative. Imagine if you only ever heard one side of a conflict. Wouldn't that make the other side look worse than they really are? What if the Sith were just a counterbalance to the Jedi's rigidity, but the Jedi couldn't stand having competition? What if this whole Jedi-Sith feud is less about good versus evil, and more about power versus power? The Sith aren't out here preaching chaos for chaos's sake. They believe in passion, strength, and freedom. These aren't inherently evil ideas. In fact, they're ideas many of us value in our own lives. But because the Jedi stand for control and order, the Sith get labeled as anarchists. The reality is far more complex. It's not about good Jedi and evil Sith. It's about two opposing philosophies clashing across the galaxy. So let's ask the uncomfortable question. Do we really know the Sith, or have we been conditioned to see them as villains? If you were in their shoes, cast out, demonized, and hunted, would you fight back? Maybe, just maybe, the Sith are not as dark as the Jedi would have us believe. To understand the Sith, we need to talk about their guiding philosophy, the Sith Code. If you've ever read it, you'll notice something fascinating. It's not a manifesto for destruction or chaos, it's a declaration of independence. It starts with the words, "Peace is a lie, there is only passion." Now, before you scoff, let's break that down. Peace, according to the Sith, is not a sustainable state. It's a temporary illusion that hides deeper conflicts and injustices. Think about the galaxy under the Republic. They claimed peace, but what they really had was corruption, exploitation, and stagnation. The Sith rejects this false peace. They argue that passion drives change. Through passion, we strive, grow, and ultimately break free from the chains that hold us back. The Sith Code isn't about unchecked violence. It's about empowerment. It's about embracing your emotions, not to destroy, but to transform. The Jedi view emotions as dangerous, something to be suppressed or eliminated. The Sith see emotions as tools, as fuel for ambition and resilience. Fear can sharpen your instincts. Anger can give you strength to fight injustice. Love can inspire you to achieve the impossible. These are not evil ideas. At its core, the Sith Code is about freedom. Freedom from oppression, from fear, and from mediocrity. It's not about chaos. It's about taking control of your destiny. Now, let's talk about Darth Bane. one of the most misunderstood figures in Star Wars history. Most people think of him as a ruthless, power-hungry tyrant. But let's give credit where it's due. Bane wasn't just a Sith Lord, he was an innovator. The guy took a fractured, chaotic Sith Order and turned it into a focused, efficient force that could challenge the Jedi. That's not evil, that's visionary leadership. Before Bane, the Sith were a mess. They had no unity, no purpose, and no chance of survival. They were constantly betraying each other, waging pointless wars, and ultimately sabotaging their own goals. Bane saw this dysfunction and said, "Enough." He introduced the rule of two, one master to embody power and one apprentice to crave it. It wasn't about creating chaos. It was about streamlining the Sith philosophy into something sustainable and effective. The brilliance of Bane's rule of two is that it emphasized quality over quantity. While the Jedi were amassing armies of mediocre Padawans, the Sith were cultivating two individuals who would embody the very essence of their philosophy. This wasn't about numbers, it was about depth. Bane understood that a smaller, more focused order could achieve far more than an army of Sith constantly at each other's throats. Was Darth Bane ruthless? Absolutely. But was he evil? That's debatable. He was a reformer, a strategist, and a leader who recognized the flaws in his system and worked to fix them. If anything, Bane's story reminds us that even the most feared figures in history often have a vision that's bigger than themselves. The Jedi are obsessed with suppressing emotions. Fear leads to anger, anger leads to hate, and hate leads to suffering, right? But here's the thing, emotions aren't inherently bad. They're natural. They're part of being alive. The Sith understand this. They don't fear emotions, they harness them. And that's not evil, that's wisdom. The Jedi teach detachment, but at what cost? Anakin Skywalker is the perfect cautionary tale. The Jedi told him to suppress his fear and his love, and when those emotions finally exploded, he fell to the dark side. What if, instead of repressing his feelings, he had been taught to understand and channel them? The Sith would argue that emotions don't make you weak, ignoring them does. The Sith believed that passion is a source of strength. Love can inspire you to protect the ones you care about. Anger can give you the power to fight against injustice. Even fear has its place, sharpening your instincts and keeping you vigilant. The Jedi see these feelings as dangerous. The Sith see them as opportunities. Who's really being wise here? At the end of the day, the Sith's approach to emotions is far more honest. They don't pretend to be above feelings. They embrace them as part of the human experience. And isn't that what makes us truly alive? The Jedi love to talk about balance, but let's take a closer look at what they mean by that. For them, balance seems to be a world where the light side reigns supreme and the dark side is completely eradicated. How is that balance? Imagine flipping a coin and only ever acknowledging one side exists. That's not balance. That's denial. The Sith, on the other hand, understand that true balance comes from embracing both light and dark. The Force isn't just about serenity and selflessness. It's also about passion, power, and ambition. By rejecting the darker aspects of the Force, the Jedi are essentially denying half of its nature. The Sith, flawed as they may be, at least acknowledge the whole spectrum. They don't shy away from the uncomfortable truths. They embrace them, wield them, and grow stronger because of it. But here's the twist. Both the Jedi and the Sith are extremes. The Jedi suppress everything, while the Sith indulge everything. True balance probably lies somewhere in the middle, a philosophy that neither side seems willing to explore. The Jedi think they're the galaxy's moral compass, but their strict rules and refusal to adapt often make them rigid and blind. The Sith are more flexible, but their ambition can sometimes spiral into obsession. They're both missing the mark in their own ways. Let's wrap this up with a hard truth. The Sith are not evil. They're misunderstood. They've been cast as villains in a story written by their enemies, and it's high time we challenge that narrative. When you strip away the propaganda, you'll find that the Sith aren't monsters. They're people, flawed, ambitious, and, yes, sometimes ruthless, but people nonetheless. Take Darth Revan, for example. Revan didn't turn to the dark side out of greed or malice. He did it because he saw the Republic's weakness and wanted to protect the galaxy from a greater threat. Or Count Dooku, who left the Jedi because he couldn't stomach their hypocrisy and the Republic's corruption. These are not the actions of evil men. These are the actions of people who saw a broken system and dared to challenge it. Even Darth Vader, the most iconic Sith of all, was driven by love, a tragically twisted love, but love nonetheless. The Sith remind us of the struggles we all face. They embody the desire to break free from chains, to rise above limitations, and to carve out a place in the galaxy. They're not evil for wanting more. They're human, or alien, for it. If anything, the Sith are rebels in their own right, rebels who refuse to be shackled by tradition and conformity. So the next time you watch Star Wars, take a moment to look beyond the lightsaber battles and the dramatic music. See the Sith for what they truly are: complex, passionate, and above all, relatable. They're not the villains of the galaxy. They're the cautionary tales, the tragic heroes, and the misunderstood visionaries who dared to challenge the status quo. Thanks so much for watching. I spend a good bit of time making sure each video is great. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. It really helps out and means a lot to me. As always, let me know your thoughts in the comments. We'll see you in the next one.